Imagine, in a quiet town, two sisters find themselves in the hands of a ruthless man who decides to turn their lives into a nightmare. His name is Cly, and he is used to taking everything he wants, regardless of the law or his conscience. But fate brought him together with a man who had only one value left: honor. And this is what changed the course of events. And just listen to how unexpected the ending of this drama was and why justice still prevailed. So be sure to subscribe, like, and watch the story to the end. The denouement will shock and leave a wise conclusion. The sun was slowly setting behind the hills of New Mexico, painting the steppe in a golden red color. Old farmer Jonathan Hale, a tall man with a gray mustache and a wrinkled face, hardened by the winds of the prairies, was returning astride his old horse Chester. He was over 60, but his back still held the straightness of a soldier. He had a war behind him, years of hard work, the loss of his wife and son. All that was left was a lonely ranch and a stubborn character that would not let him break. That evening he heard a noise on the fairground, more like a roar of a crowd than a joyful celebration. People were huddled in a circle around a wagon, where two men in dusty cloaks were shouting out a price. Jonathan leaned closer and froze. On the wagon stood two girls, young but exhausted, with frightened eyes. The older one, with chestnut hair, could barely stand on her feet, pressing her hands to her chest. The younger, just a girl, stubbornly pressed her lips together, but tears were streaming down her face. Two strong beauties, pure as a mountain spring. One of the traders shouted, "Who will give more?" The crowd burst into laughter. Someone threw in a dirty comment. Someone whistled. Jonathan's insides twisted. He had seen war. He had seen death, but this scene had stirred a rage in him that he had not felt in years. "How much?" he asked hoarsely, pushing forward. The merchant looked him up and down, narrowing his eyes. "Old man, why do you need it?" "How much?" Jonathan repeated. The crowd laughed, but when he pulled out a bag of gold coins, the laughter died down. In those days, gold meant more than life. $300. The second merchant grinned, confident that the old man would back down. But Jonathan held out the money. "Count it, and let it go." There was a gasp from everyone around. The crowd murmured in disappointment, deprived of the spectacle. The girls were roughly lowered from the cart, and they immediately pressed themselves to him, as if to their last hope. "Now you are free," he told them calmly. "I'll take you to my ranch. It's safe there." The eldest introduced herself in a trembling voice. "I'm Mary, and this is my sister, Clara." Jonathan nodded. He saw that there was so much pain behind those eyes that words weren't necessary. The road to the ranch was long. The sisters barely spoke, only looking back as if someone was chasing them. But Jonathan felt that the trouble wasn't over. There were people left in town who didn't like the fact that the old man broke the bargaining table. Among them was Clyde Rhodes, a local cattle owner and also the owner of a gambling house. He was used to getting what he wanted, and he wasn't shy about his methods. That night, 3 horsemen rode up to Jonathan's ranch. They knocked on the door with their rifle butts. "Old man," a rough voice rang out, "do you know what you did? Those were our girls. We paid for them. Give them back and we'll forget." Jonathan opened the door, still holding the gun. "They're free, and you'll never set foot on my land again." "You're wrong, old man," the guest grinned. "We'll be back." They left, but the air remained heavy, like an approaching thunderstorm. In the morning, the girls helped Jonathan with the housework: hay, chickens, water from the well. Clara smiled for the first time when she saw a turkey chasing a rooster. It seemed like the world was beginning to come alive for them. But Jonathan was not happy. He knew people like Clyde too well. In the Wild West, a good deed often turned into a deadly danger, and a storm was already brewing ahead. The sky was covered with clouds, and it was as if nature itself knew that trouble was gathering over the ranch. Jonathan was working in the barn when he noticed a dusty pillar in the distance riders. His heart told him it was Clyde Rhodes and his men. He was right. -1 armed man rode into the yard. Clyde himself was in front, tall, in a black vest, with a grin that always foreshadowed someone else's misfortune. "Old man," he drawled, jumping off his horse. "I've come for mine. Yours aren't here," Jonathan answered firmly, grabbing his gun. Clyde chuckled. "You're wrong. These girls are merchandise. I paid for them. They're mine." Mary and Clara looked out of the house, huddled close together. When they saw Clyde, their faces turned pale, like birds trapped in a cage. "You won't get them," Jonathan snapped. Clyde's gaze turned cold. "Do you know what happens to those who get in my way?" He made a sign, and his men dismounted. One began to beat the butt of his rifle on the fence, another began to laugh and spit on the ground. They felt like they were the masters, and Jonathan's house was prey. But the old man did not flinch. "Go away while you live." There was a tense silence. Only the wind whistled in the dry grass. Clyde took a step closer, his hand falling on his holster. "You have one night, old man. I'll be back tomorrow. If the girls aren't ready, I'll burn your house and bury you with them." He spat at the threshold, turned and galloped away, followed by the others. The house was silent. Clara trembled, her face buried in her sister's shoulder. "He'll kill us," she whispered. Jonathan sat down at the table, his palm on the cracked wood. "No," he said slowly. "No one will touch you. As long as I'm alive, no one." But inside he knew this would be a war, and an unequal war. He spent the whole night preparing his weapons, checking the ammunition, sharpening his knife, reinforcing the windows with boards. The old horse anxiously stamped his hoof in the stall, as if he sensed the approaching storm. And Mary came to him at dawn. "Why are you doing this?" Her voice trembled. "You could have turned away in the square, like everyone else." Jonathan looked at her. Suddenly he saw the features of his dead daughter in her face. "Because no one saved my family when trouble came." He fell silent. "But I will save you." And as the sun rose over the prairie, Jonathan realized this day would be his last test. He would stand alone against the whole city, if necessary, and if fate had prepared death for him, let it come with a weapon in its hands. The day dragged on painfully long. Jonathan seemed to hear the tension building in the air, as if before a thunderstorm. The girls were silent, sitting by the stove, and only occasionally stole glances at him. There was more trust in their eyes than fear, and that was what kept him from breaking. Closer to midday, a dust storm arose in the steppe again. This time there were not 6 of them, but more than a dozen. Clyde had brought a whole gang, men with rifles, revolvers, ropes. Their faces showed the anticipation of easy prey. "Well, old man," Clyde called, riding closer, ready for a fun day. Jonathan came out onto the porch, gun in hand, eyes steady, back straight. He looked less like an old farmer than a soldier standing on his last stand. "Go away, Clyde. This is the last time I'll tell you." The crowd burst out laughing. One of the thugs spat on the ground. "That old man can barely stand. We'll take him down like a rabbit." The shot rang out unexpectedly. Jonathan fired into the air, and the laughter died down instantly. One more step, and I'm not shooting at the sky. The horses began to stir. The bandits exchanged glances. No one expected the old man to be so cold-blooded. One of Clyde's men was the first to give in. He pulled the revolver, and immediately collapsed, struck by a shot. A shootout began. The bullets rang, hit the walls of the house, knocked splinters out of the fence. Jonathan shot accurately, saving every bullet. He hid behind a porch column, moved quickly for his age, and his eyes sparkled with a cold fire. Mary and Clara, holding their breath, sat inside, pressed against each other. Every second seemed an eternity. "Burn him!" Clyde roared. 2 bandits ran out to the barn with torches. The flames shot up, smelling of burnt wood. The horse in the stall neighed in horror. Jonathan rushed forward, fired, knocking down one. He knocked the second down with a blow from the butt of his rifle. But at that moment a bullet slid across his shoulder, leaving a bloody streak. He hissed, but did not fall. "Old man," Clyde yelled, pulling out his revolver. "You think you can stop us all? You alone against the world?" Jonathan caught his breath, raised his gun, and answered, "Then let the whole world try to break me." And the fight flared up with renewed vigor. Smoke, fire, screams, the ringing of shots. At that moment, time seemed to stop, and the prairie turned into an arena where they were deciding what was stronger, the hatred of the crowd or the will of one man. Smoke filled the yard. The crackle of the burning barn merged with the roar of shots. Jonathan felt his arm weaken, but every movement was precise, as if life itself told him to stand to the end. Clyde rushed forward. "Kill him," he yelled, urging the men on. "My house, my girls." But the bandits began to retreat. 3 were already lying on the ground. 2 more were groaning, pressing their wounds. The old man had shot too accurately, too coldly. They expected easy prey, but they had run into a stone wall. And then something happened that no one expected. Mary came out of the house. In her hands was Jonathan's old revolver, which he had given her in case of emergency. She stood, trembling, but there was a fire in her eyes. "Go away," she screamed, pointing the gun straight at Clyde. "Leave us." Clyde froze. The crowd, too. At that moment, everyone saw. The girl was no longer a victim. She was ready to fight. Jonathan, taking advantage of the pause, stepped forward, aiming the gun. "Your game is over, Clyde." And he fired. The bullet knocked Clyde off his feet. He fell in the dust, and his men, stunned and frightened, began to run away. No one wanted to die for someone who had just fallen. Suddenly, silence returned. Only the crackling of the burning barn and the neighing of the horse in the smoke. Jonathan, staggering, leaned on his gun. Mary rushed to him, and Clara to the stall, releasing the frightened Chester. They acted quickly, as if they had learned to live in a harsh world overnight. Jonathan looked at them and, despite his wound and fatigue, for the first time in a long time he felt warmth in his chest. "It's over," he said. "You're free." At sunset, 3 people stood by the fire. The house survived, the barn burned to the ground, but it didn't matter anymore. The main thing was that Clyde had fallen, and with him the power of fear with which he had held the city had collapsed. Mary squeezed Jonathan's hand tightly. "You saved us," he answered with a sad smile. "Maybe it wasn't me who saved you, but you who saved me." Tears glistened in her eyes, but not of fear, but of gratitude. And at that moment it became clear, even in a world full of cruelty, one determination to go to the end can change fate. This story shows, real strength is not in weapons or in a crowd, but in the courage of one person to say no to evil. Clyde died not only from a bullet, but also from the fact that his greed and hatred turned against him. And Jonathan proved that even an old man, who seemingly has nothing to lose, can change his fate and protect those who are weaker. The main lesson is simple: justice always finds a way, and good wins when someone decides to take its side.